Hey guys, this is not Automagic Volume 3, but instead it's a video discussing the pretentious situation that Eugen's found itself in for not paying its employees. They've ended up in French labor court. So this is going to be a good one. We're also going to go down a little trip down memory lane to see exactly how we got to this situation. So get a tasty beverage and relax and enjoy the show. Eugen Systems was founded in 2000 by Alexis and Cedric Ledersey in Paris, France, and it started in a small apartment and then grew into a full-fledged gaming studio by the mid-2000s. Notable Eugen games include Act of War series, Ruse, which is what's playing in the background, Act of Aggression, Wargame, and most recently Steel Division. We start this story with Wargame European Escalation, which was released in 2012 and was critically acclaimed. It was a great game. It was something different compared to the Company of Heroes and all the other RTSs at the time. It was arguably a great game. It sold well. Following Wargame European Escalation was Wargame Airland Battle, which arrived a year later in 2013 and was just even better than European Escalation in every single way. It was a phenomenal game. Then in early 2014, Eugen Systems launched the third installment in the Wargame franchise, Wargame Red Dragon, which is a game we all know and love, and hate at the same time. Wargame Red Dragon, like the games before it, was a commercial success, and it sold hundreds of thousands of games, and is continued to be played up into 2019 now, with an average of 1,000 players playing each day, which is pretty impressive for a small studio and a niche game, and a game that really doesn't appeal to a huge broad audience like Company of Heroes would. So then in 2015, what does Eugen do? It releases AOA, Act of Aggression, which kind of tried to capitalize on the old RTS games of the past, like your Command and Conquer series, and it didn't do such a great job of that. It didn't sell very well, and it was even so bad that they had to relaunch it and change a ton of the core systems of the game just to make the game palatable for people to actually enjoy it and play it. And so this is kind of the start of some potential problems for Eugen Systems. So it basically was everything that Wargame was not. It was not commercially successful, it did not have a lot of people playing it, and it generally was a flop of a game. So next, Eugen Systems goes back to the Wargame series and starts issuing DLC content for Wargame Red Dragon. And one of the nations that was added was Yugoslavia, part of the Double Reds expansion pack or DLC pack. It gave you beautifully overpowered units like these Patibranki 90s, which are using a launcher that never really was even in service in Yugoslavia. But that's beside the point. The bigger issue was that it presented a ton of balance issues for the game, whereas like these AA units, they are IR and or Scalos, and they have no radar, so you can't see them. They have range comparable to almost a Patriot, and they're just terribly unbalanced when compared to the other offerings in other nations. So why would you play other nations when you can play these DLC nations, which are terribly broken and just insanely strong? And then you have the 90-point little Helo killer, the L17K, which is just a little monster. It's going to eat that tiger alive. That's what it does. It's unfortunate, but it really, really screwed up the balance of the game. What you're watching is the nightmare that everyone ran into in fall of 2016 when Israel DLC was released. The Maglands were a complete nuisance. They were a 10-man special forces squad with spike missile launchers and that were super fast to travel, and you pretty much could do nothing to stop them at that time except for mortar the hell out of them. And as you can see here, they are killing everything in front of them, and they were just almost unstoppable for a couple weeks until they were nerfed. And even then, they weren't nerfed very hard. So this was the state of ranked play in fall of 2016, which caused a lot of people to reconsider, do I want to torture myself playing this game? Not to mention the rampant helo rushing that was also involved in the game. It just wasn't a great situation at all. So this is just another example of this ridiculous DLC infantry fighting vehicle, which, if you get close to super heavies, you can kill them because its rate of fire is insane and it has good AP value. And here's a fan favorite, the meme MiG, as they're called, where they have two long-range AA missiles and they ripple fire, so they fire in pairs. And they are absolute nuisance to play against and a complete nightmare and pretty game-breaking. So this is the state of Wargame at the end of 2016. You have DLC infantry that can out-trade and out-grind any other infantry in the game, and you have stealth tanks. You have little nightmares of little 90-point ASFs like this L-17K that's going to go shoot down a Nighthawk because, well, that's what Serbian things do. Eugen basically pulled the plug and didn't address any of the game balance issues and left the game in a pretty terrible state, which is why the community is so salty towards Eugen. So add in a ton of terribly unbalanced DLC, and then this strategy, which is called Hell Rushing, which is the mainstay of competitive now in Wargame Red Dragon, and it has been for the last 2 years. This is how you get to a high rank, is by cheesing your opponent, because it's almost impossible to defend against 8 to 12 Mi-24s and whatever the hell else is following it. You would have to buy 300 points into aircraft just to even fend that off, and then you still might not even win. Although he probably should have spawned M36s in reservists to defeat this Hella Rush. Unfortunately, he wasn't so lucky, and this is pretty much how the competitive scene has been in Wargame Red Dragon for the last 2 to 3 years. Sometime during 2016, Focus Home Interactive and Eugen decided to split up, or they just didn't renew the contract for Wargame, which led Eugen to pursue other avenues, which this avenue ended up being Steel Division 1944, a World War II RTS that no one really in the Eugen community outside of some select weeaboos were really asking for. Eugen teamed up with Paradox to publish the game, and Paradox, it seems, had grand plans for the game to push a ton of DLC into it in usual Paradox fashion. Paradox is mostly known for the Hearts of Iron series and a bunch of other strategy games that they've published over the last 5 to 10 years. The game itself was a pretty good RTS game, and it played a little bit slower than Wargame, but it was really buggy on the launch, and there were some units that were terribly overpowered, and it kind of felt like you were playing the same DLC nightmare that Wargame had turned into, but a freshly released game with bugs, with a small developing community, and developers who really didn't seem to address or see the problems that were occurring in the game community. As 2017 progressed, Steel Division 1944 started to really drop in player count, and it got to the point that it was even lower than Wargame Red Dragon, which is not a good sign for a game that just had released 6 months earlier. Sometime during 2017/2018, Paradox made a choice not to continue on with Eugen Systems. They released the last of the DLC, and then Eugen started to get work on the sequel to Steel Division 1944 all by themselves. 2018 is when things start to go really bad for Eugen Systems. Half of its workforce went on strike, claiming that there were serious violations of their workers' rights, including delayed payments, delayed overtime pay, and wages that were below the country's minimum wage for that type of position. Until early 2018, we really didn't have many signs that there were serious issues going on at Eugen Systems, other than some Glassdoor reviews and some messages on public forums and some secret PMs that people were getting. Everything seemed to be pretty normal, but when half of your company goes on strike, there's got to be something more going on. On April 3rd, 2018, the strike ended. The employees chose instead to take Eugen to the French labor courts, which is currently ongoing, and we won't hear the end of that until March 2019. So in late 2018, it seems that 6 workers got fired from Eugen, which drops the employee count to an even lower number than before, as outlined in this tweet. I mean, any way you cut this, it doesn't look good. You have a studio that has been halved, essentially, and has half the staff that it used to have when it was making games like Wargame, and that's not looking good for the quality of the game. Steel Division already lacked compared to Wargame, and now you have less people to work on the game, and so is the quality going to be the same? I don't think so. This statement brings up some pretty bad news. It starts with the fact that towards the end of 2016, Eugen workers discovered they were being paid less than the national mandated minimums, which already seem pretty low in France. So it seems an average Eugen employee with a master's degree and 2 years of industry experience was being paid around $25,000 USD, when the state minimum is $32,000. And that to me just seems a little insane, especially when they're expected to commute and live and work in Paris, one of the most expensive cities in Western Europe, on a salary that is basically equivalent to what a Tier 1 support help desk person would make in the United States. It just doesn't make sense. I used to work for a CGI company, and I can tell you that, at least in the United States, the salaries that Eugen is paying is almost unheard of. That would get you almost nobody for a modeler, for a programmer, or something like that. For a decent programmer, you're probably going to spend $60,000 to $75,000 at least just for an entry-level position, whereas Eugen seems to be paying developers far less. It doesn't make sense. I know you can't compare country to country, but that's a person living in Paris, and, well, the Midwest of the United States is far cheaper to live than Paris.
But then, one day, in Paris, there was a meeting.
Messieurs, the time has come for us to stop making this spotty car.
Mon Dieu.
Sacre bleu. But what shall nous do instead?
Coat hangers, umbrella.
How is this for a plan? We make terrible cars. In every way, horrible.
Maybe très ugly.
Oh, well.
The engine très horrible.
Oh, nasty, unreliable, inconfortable, et l'intérieur. Fabrique en spit et Kleenex.
Spit et Kleenex, oui.
Ouais. C'est une bonne idée, n'est-ce pas? Oh, ouais. Ne regardez pas un cadeau de cheval dans la bouche.
Monsieur, salut la voiture horrible.
And get the chef the suspension up here so we can fire him immediately. Oh, yes. This breakfast meeting will put Peugeot on the map for many years to come. Make no mistake.
So it's like kind of ironic that the trailer for Steel Division 2 starts with fight your battles, because it seems that the only battles that Eugen is fighting now are in French labor court and in their own offices to keep the company running. Because this trailer just shows a bunch of tanks exploding and a bunch of rockets being launched, and they're asking for us to pre-order a game that we haven't seen any gameplay footage from. How is it going to play? Is it going to be completely different than Steel Division 1944? Or is it going to be a reskin to just appeal to a bunch of Slavaboos? It seems like a really weird approach to market a game with just a few fancy trailers after the last game has been kind of a dumpster fire. You really don't get any good feelings from this trailer. It looks kind of meh compared to the previous trailers of Steel Division or Wargame. There's really nothing in here that's like, yeah, just take my money. Nothing really says that. So let's look at what we get for pre-orders here. You can buy the standard edition of a game that you haven't seen any gameplay for only $40. It gives you the Steel Division game and 10 free DLC. But you don't get that history pack or commander pack. But you do get 2 exclusive aces, 2 exclusive camos, access to the beta, but you don't get to play the game early. It's a big deal breaker. Let's bump it up a notch. You got the $59 package, which is the same as the one before it, except for it gives you a commander pack and $48 of early access to the game. Now, if you really want to be a full-blown Slavaboo, you can get the $70 package, which, as the game, takes away the commander pack and then gives you everything on the bottom pre-order. It doesn't make sense to me. But if you want to be the ultimate Eugen fanboy, you can get Steel Division 2 Total Conflict Edition, and that gives you everything your body could ever desire. So the wargame community is cautiously optimistic about this, because if Eugen goes under, the servers shut down and we have nothing. So no one really wants to see that. We would love to see some gameplay footage of Steel Division 2, but there's no game footage. There's nothing. There's very little PR, there's no press release, there's no reviews or nothing. So we're just set to sit here and just ponder what it might be. And right now it's looking like Steel Division 2 is a cash grab to just get a bunch of money out of a bunch of Russians who really like T-34s. So it's almost February 2019 and we have no gameplay videos yet. We just have a few dev diaries showing the new campaign features and a few nice little new quirks that are within the game. Most of the Eugen gaming community that's formed around their RTS games is sitting back with cautious optimism, hoping that Steel Division 2 ends up being a good game, because we kind of want to see Eugen do well, but it's kind of hard to get behind a company that doesn't really pay its employees fairly and is in labor court due to that reason. So thanks for listening to me talk about this situation for the last 15 minutes, and I hope it gave you some insight into how we ended up here.